Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Maybe the best place in this city where a writer can show his works or her works in a store that celebrates the individual is Coliseum Books. Its shelves are most comforting and attractive, and those inspecting them the most literate. The owners are George Leibson and Irwin Hersch, neither of whom would come here alone without the other person. So what do you think it is that's made Coliseum Books such a special place?
I think that's a question for George.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that what's made it special over all the years, and we started a long time ago, was the ability to put on the shelves the books that people wanted and keep them on the shelves so that even if we weren't selling huge numbers of books, we always had a terrific selection of backlist, as it's called, and mid-list titles that other stores didn't stock or stocked for a week or two and send them back or let them sell out. And we were able to develop a system of, even before computers, of reordering so that even if we didn't have a lot of copies of a book, we were able to reorder it. And when a customer came in, they found what they were looking for.
How long have you guys been together?
30 years, about, roughly.
And when was the first time? What started it? How did you start Coliseum Books?
Irwin,
we had a third partner originally, Seymour Rubin, who unfortunately died a couple of years ago. And he was in the book business. He was one of the first people to have a chain of bookstores. He had it in New York until it went down. But he hated not being in the book business, so he decided to open another store. And he knew that George would be a good manager for the store, and that I might have some money hidden away somewhere. And the three of us put it together, and Cy found this location in the old General Motors building.
57th and Broadway.
Right.
Boy.
And we were there
Great
for
location.
30 years.
27 years
27
there.
years.
So, George, what was it you were doing that you would be a good person with the store?
Well, I started my career, as it were, as it is actually still, in the book business by being a clerk at Bookmasters, which was the chain that Cy was a co-partner in. And they had, at the time I started in 1965 when I was in college, they had several stores, one of which was at Broadway and between 42nd and 43rd Street, next to Toffanetti's at the time.
Oh, Toffanetti's.
Which became Nathan's and now is NASDAQ.
But it was never, nothing ever came up to Toffanetti's. That was the big treat, wasn't it?
Right.
My father used to take me to Toffanetti's for lunch. Right.
So my mother knew somebody who worked for Cy, and he actually didn't hire me because he said, come back. I was at 57th Street store. So then the other gentleman hired me, his partner, Richard Casack. And I started as a summer job, and I just kept it up. And when I came out of the Army, I went right back to it, and I was actually working in a store right near where our present store is now. They had a little store, 3 West 42nd Street. We're now at 11 West 42nd Street. And it was a very tiny store, and I worked there when I came out of the Army. And then I managed the store at 57th Street just as they were losing control of it. They had overexpanded. Opened a store at Penn Station, which became a Barnes & Noble later on and was only closed after a while. And so he had confidence in me, and I also lived in the neighborhood. So he lived across from Carnegie Hall, and I lived a block the other way from Broadway. And he said, what about this place? And I said, I'll manage it. And if you need some money, I think I can raise a few dollars. And that's how it came about.
So, Irwin, are you a reader? Do you read books?
I used to read more than I do now, yeah. I have to read now with a magnifying glass.
Stop it. Oh, come on. But you love books.
Yeah, I love books, as objects as well as reading material.
There is something very special about books, isn't there? What is that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there is a tactile sense and there's a visual sense as well, that both of those things. And then, of course, there's the knowledge that inside the books is knowledge. So you have all of those things working.
And they're some of them are so beautiful and so beautifully done. Well, I always loved the Coliseum Books at 57th Street. It was terrific, and you'd walk in and there'd be tables there with things that you should read, even if it's not on the current list, and tables where things were on current lists, and atlases and maps and children's books and, I mean, everything, right?
Right. It was. It grew. It was. I mean, people remembered at the end when we had 8,000 feet on the street and 8,000 feet of selling space in the basement, 4,000 feet of selling space in the basement. But we started with a very small store on the corner there. I mean, it was only 3,500 square feet, and we kept adding to it whenever some space became available.
But you have a very welcoming space now on 42nd Street. What's the difference? How much of your trade of 57th Street came from the neighborhood?
That's a good question. I mean, do you mean from the neighborhood residents or from the people who worked in the neighborhood?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it could be both.
Because it was both.
Yeah.
And the preponderance of the trade, as far as I could measure it, and we never really had a fair way of measuring it, was from the people who worked in the neighborhood. The building itself, originally, when we moved in, was no longer the GM building, but it had BT Credit Corp was in there. They had rabbit warrens of offices, and those people read books. It was incredible. I mean, enormous number of books. Some of them were Harlequin romances, but some of them were the most abstruse titles you could find.
Do you make judgments about customers when do you look at the selection? Sometimes I'd love to buy a book, but I would be too embarrassed to buy it. Do the people who are selling it look at that person askance?
Oh, yes. I'm afraid to say that some people do. I rarely did that. First of all, I'm no longer on the floor of the store. I had a volatile temper, and I don't think I was really perfect for...
Who was that great movie producer you threw out of the store one day?
Dory Sherry.
Oh, he was such a nice man.
But he did something terrible.
Well, he didn't do something so terrible, but I mean, he took a book down, and then he took another book down. He didn't put them back, and I said, "Would you please put it back?" And I was younger, I was arrogant, and he was, and I forgot, and I didn't even know who he was, of course. But I had a friend who's no longer alive, my friend Leon, who was working at the time. He says, "You know, you just threw out Dory Sherry." I said, "Oh," and I barely knew who Dory Sherry was because, he was more of the line from
How do we explain who he is? Because I'm sure most of the people watching don't remember him either. But he was a big producer of many important movies, and then he was very close to a president. Who was it? It was Kenneth. Was he with? I don't know.
It must have been before that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Must
anyway,
have been Hoover.
No, it wouldn't have been. He was on the other side.
How many? What percentage do you think of your customers have gone to 42nd Street?
Very, very small percentage.
Oh.
I mean, one of the things that I discovered over time in the old store was the truth that people really shop where it's convenient and close to them. This is not the suburbs. You don't get in your car and go 1 mile farther along to go to your favorite store because you're in the car already. You're in the street. You're either working in the neighborhood or you live in the neighborhood, and you go there because it's convenient to go there. And if a store were closer to you, you might go there as well. Now, the old Bookmasters at 57th and 7th became a Barnes & Noble, but it was small. And people, if they had the chance, they would come to us instead. And but for the most part, people only go where we tried to advertise in the old neighborhood. I had a few merchants who put stuff up for us. And in my own building, and I live in a block away, in my own building, people would say, "Oh, we missed that store so much." I said, "We're in business again." And they said, "Oh, but that's so far." And so that we've lost, and we don't have a residential component in our new location.
So you have to cultivate. You're across the street from Bryant Park.
Right.
You've got a lot of businesses around you.
Correct.
Yeah.
We have a lot of businesses. It would have been nice if the CUNY Graduate Center were still
there
instead of the State Optometry College.
Well, they should be able to read.
But they can. But there are very few people in that building. Yeah. It's amazing.
What happened at 57th Street, which is this problem of New York, right?
George knows the story about the rent better than I do.
Well, what happened was that...
But you got to talk a little bit, or why are you here?
Why?
He's here to support me.
All right.
He always
George
supports
me. George can talk for hours.
All right.
Well, the reason that we had to move was the same story that everybody has. The lease ran out, and it was going to be a sharp increase. Part of the reason was that the owner of the building the previous owner of the building, who had signed his original lease with us in 1974 and a second lease in 1987, which started in 89 or something. He sold the building. He sold it to Joe Moynihan, who is a developer. I heard recently he bought the Sears Tower, so I don't know, but he grew up in Queens or something like that. And he told us right up front, 2 years before our lease was up, that we would not be able to afford to stay. He bought the place on speculation because it's close to the Time Warner Center, the AOL Center at the time, and he knew what he needed to make in rent. And he was very fair about that. I didn't have a problem with that. And we let the store finally expire. Did a very good job closing it up. Everybody was pretty happy about the way it went, but there were many people who worked for us for 20 years, 30 years, and we felt that we should try to find a new location. And we spent a year doing that, over a year. And the choices were not wonderful. I mean, we're not on a corner anymore. We're not in an area that has a residential component. It is a high-profile neighborhood, and fortunately they've put a crosswalk in right next to our store, which is the doing of Dan Biederman and the Bryant Park Restoration Group. So we thank them for that. And but it was a long search, and probably would have been better to acknowledge the changes in the book industry and just go peacefully away and try what we did.
Well, let's talk about some of the changes. So it was the rent that precipitated the immediate closing, right?
Correct.
But is the role of an independent bookstore owner so difficult to maintain?
Here it is. I mean, rent is a huge, huge part of it. And our sales had been going down even in the old store. Barnes & Noble first opened in the suburbs, so that took some of the people who might have had to walk a block in New York, but were right there in their bedroom community. And then they opened on Lincoln Center, and that was a huge blow. But we were still doing all right. Here, it's been a little different. The people are so used to the amenities that Barnes & Noble and Borders have created the need for in bookstores, that don't
Like
really
what?
add to the real bookstore experience, but like armchairs and unfortunately cafes, of which we now have.
You
one.
have a cafe,
We
right.
do have a cafe with its attendant difficulties, but it's much harder. I heard from somebody that Seattle still has a load of independent bookstores, but you don't see very many in New York. And general independent bookstores, besides the Strand, which is sort of a different kind of store, there are very few.
Powell's and
Powell's is in Portland.
Yeah.
Yes.
What about that big store in Denver? Is that still?
Yeah, Tattered Cover is still there, and
Yeah.
I haven't seen it. But she owns this huge warehouse.
Right.
I mean.
But at one point, I spoke to her, and she said that she had a Barnes & Noble on either side of her, and she was still surviving.
Well, but she owns this warehouse.
Right.
It's huge. It makes our store look.
So how do you
tiny.
order books? The changes in the book publishing business, do they print books differently than they used to?
I don't know about printing books differently, but certainly, all these things have been commented on before. Our buyers are terrific. I have
How many people work there for you?
in our store now? Well, full-time, probably around 25, and another 15. We have about 40. We used to have 80 plus in the old store, but which made it a lot easier to work and to make it what we want. Here, we're always shorthanded. We can't return the books fast enough. We can't.
Don't tell me all the
unpack
things
them.
you can't do because
But
I don't
no,
want
but I'm just saying that that we have great buyers,
Yeah.
absolutely wonderful buyers.
And how do they decide what books to buy?
Well, the sales rep comes in and
He does.
opens the catalog, and they've already looked through the catalog, and they know the main authors. They know how much money is being put behind the book in terms of advertising and co-op advertising. They know what the cover looks like very frequently. They know what the publisher's record is for backing the book, and they also have curiosity about many subjects. Now, buyers that we have now are huge readers, and I'm not a huge reader, but I like to read. But they are huge readers. And my former buyer, who had passed away a few years ago, she was a huge reader. She goes back into Bookmasters a long time ago.
Does the cover of a book make a difference to the book?
Certainly it makes a difference.
So a lot of people do judge books by the cover.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, otherwise the publishers, I mean, they're no fools, the publishers. Certainly not in these matters. And they spend a lot of money and time on this.
But you've been in the book business for a long time now. How have reading habits changed? A lot, huh?
They've changed a lot, and part of them, I discussed this with my buyers before we came here, and part of what they've said is, and what you can acknowledge, is that the society has changed a lot.
Right.
And people have less time to read and less inclination to read, and too many other
Why do you think they have less inclination to read?
Because the society has become
computers, iPods, all this stuff. Huh?
Society has become interested in instant gratification, and a book sometimes is not instantly gratifying. So the books they do tend to read, the self-help books, even the self-help books, are more to the point of, like Blink, or his other book. These are books that tell the person it's okay to not think, to go with your first instinct, because they don't have to exercise their mind. And I think too many people are in that category. So even though there are a huge number of people who love books, do not want to buy on Amazon, they want to touch the book, feel the book, open the book, look into the book, and have books around them when they buy. That's all true, but you're drawing from a much smaller pool of people, even in New York City.
Do the buyers comment on the quality of the books? I mean, the writing and stuff? Are we producing as many good writers as we used to, do you think?
Oh, I think so, because there are so many small presses that later on get co-opted by the bigger ones if they show. There are so many small presses. There are so many opportunities. All these writing programs and things like that. Everybody has a novel that they're writing, even if they have another job.
Do people buy more fiction, nonfiction, biographies, current topics? Is there a breakdown that way?
I can't really say if it's changed much. The one thing I've noticed is that the more esoteric titles in whether it be philosophy or in sociology or in the hard sciences, we're not selling those the way we used to. And art and music. Of course, I was in the music area before on 57th Street, and we could sell anything on music. But here, I cannot seem to sell that. There's less interest in that, in these expensive books, and anything you can get the information of from the web. People tap into the web. You no longer see a baseball encyclopedia. I mean, that was a great book in the days, but it hasn't been revised in 10 years because all you need to do is, I'm watching a game. Oh, yeah, I'll click on this guy. Oh, there's his record. Wow. I don't need a baseball encyclopedia.
Right, and people read the newspapers also on the
newspapers, magazines. There's just less inclination to bury yourself in Anna Karenina or in something long. As a society, there's less. There are certainly far fewer people.
Are you on the internet? Do you work with computers?
No. Except that when you order a hamburger, it goes into the kitchen by computer.
I see. But that's at your restaurant that you own.
Yeah.
Right. But so you're not on a computer. Then do you understand what's happening to bookstores and stuff? Do you have an appreciation of the depth of information you can get?
George has always been interested in computers way before anybody else. He was doing a lot of stuff on the internet for the store long before guys had these systems. But I just decided that it was too late for me to bother with computers.
That's not an unusual.
Never too late
but
to
that's
do
not
anything.
An unusual attitude.
Is there an age difference in people who buy books?
I think there is. I do think that the older people still have the habit of getting their information from books, getting entertainment value from books, and they have a certain set of aesthetic criteria that present-day other entertainment doesn't measure up to. So they come back to books.
So we talked a little bit about the audio tapes, books on audio tapes, because the Times wrote this big article on books on audio tapes. Is that a big element of sales? It's not really, is it?
It isn't for us, even though I speak.
Well, it may be more in the suburbs if you're driving in a car a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, I have some friends who've been in the book business forever, and if they can't be reading because they're driving, they put the tape in. It's wonderful. But we have a nice selection of them. They look nice, and then we send them back and get the next ones.
I've always been amazed at the publishing business because it seems to me that they're quite old-fashioned. Am I wrong?
I don't know. After
don't
all these
really know
years
the
in the
publishing side of it.
right? It's really amazing how few people in the publishing side I've come to know.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed that people move up and they get their imprint on a book,
Right.
and
then all of a sudden, right.
yeah.
But what amazes me is what they pay for a book and then how they market a book. So it's your people who they have to talk to. But in the chain stores, I mean, a lot of them just go to the chains. Do they all come to you, all the publishers now? Still?
The reps?
Yeah.
Yes, the reps tend to come to us, or the representatives of the
But
book,
I'm always surprised they don't employ more political techniques in the selling of a book.
such as.
Well, there's not much television advertising for books. There is some.
Yes, some.
And some of that may be individual authors who have done that.
Have you
Because I think
seen-
lots of authors have gone and hired their own
Oh, absolutely.
publicists. Yeah.
Have you seen the ad for Dick and Jane in Yiddish or
No.
whatever? Well, it was done on the web.
Ah.
And that is now, and it was so successful,
Isn't that interesting?
Yes, it was done on the web with a little. I actually got it in my email, and everybody I know got it.
You
in
have to
their
send
email.
it to me. I have to email
Give me the email address. I'll have to find it.
All
But
right.
and it's now. I heard something on NPR where they were talking about this is the coming wave. But of course, you can't have too much of it because we know what we do with extraneous emails. We
Right,
let that go.
right.
But this one was very cleverly done and made you want to go and get the book. And we sold a lot.
And when you talked about the armchairs, do you think that Barnes & Noble tapped into one of our very large social problems, which is loneliness, and that people go to a bookstore because it's a place to go and see other people and work?
Oh, I think that there's no question that they
Yeah.
did that.
And Starbucks with its computer stuff, the connection. They're brilliant kinds of
Right.
selling.
Well, we actually happen to have Wi-Fi in our
good.
cafe, not because we put it in, but because you can get it from Bryant Park.
From Bryant Park, right.
And they've just made it stronger. So it's they were very clever. I mean, I'm an old-fashioned, not even an entrepreneur, just an old-fashioned bookseller, and the question is, can you do that in Midtown Manhattan in the 21st century? Very difficult. You have to have a specialty. There are specialty stores that can get by.
Yeah.
But we're trying to be a general store to everybody.
Yeah.
I no longer have an auto repair section, and we've dispensed with a few other things.
So has your self-help section grown?
No, the self-help section has changed from books that actually took some reading into books that are, with a headline, a diagram, a chart. It's like the web has been moved into the book, and perhaps that's why that's why it was done, and that seems to appeal to the current generation of book readers, if there are any.
So, Irwin, what did you like about having a bookstore? Did you like going to the bookstore?
Yeah, I did. Of course, one of the reasons that I'm not talking very much is that George knows more about the book business than I do. And also, once I moved into Grand Central, and I had a store in Grand Central, and then when they kicked us out, then I moved up to...
Why did they kick you out?
Because they were renovating the station. And then I moved up to Mount Kisco, and I built the most beautiful store I ever saw.
Was.
Yeah.
And in 5 months, it burned to the ground.
Oh, Irwin.
Yeah, it was a killer.
He
real
took
killer.
the fixtures from Grand Central, which were gorgeous fixtures.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, so that was sort of the end of the book business for me. Then I tried the antique business, which was a disaster, because I didn't know anything about it. And now I'm in the restaurant business.
All right, but you're still in the book business.
Yes, he's still part of
But
it.
George is your guy.
Yeah,
Without George, you wouldn't do. Do you travel to other bookstores? I've been to a bookstore because I'm married to a writer,
Right.
and so there's a bookstore in Florida in Coral Gables? That's a famous independent bookstore.
No, I haven't
Yeah, I've
seen
heard
that
of
one.
it, but what's the name of it?
I don't remember it.
They're I don't know if they're not. I have no one from Key West and
Yeah.
Minnesota and in
Yeah.
Arizona. No, those stores. When I travel, I stop in a bookstore.
Yeah.
And when I went to London, I used to walk on Charing Cross Road. I
right.
went to Hatchards, and I like those stores.
Do you
Those are
remember
wonderful.
Helene Hamp's book about?
Yes, the
That was
45.
the 40,
Charing Cross.
35, 45.
something, 54 Charing
Yeah,
Cross Road. I
her
never remember.
correspondence with
Right.
the book dealer.
And we used to sell a lot of that too.
Yeah.
In other locations, my girlfriend lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, and they just closed what used to be the Hungry Mind bookshop, but he sold the name, and then he ended up closing anyway. And the Ruminator, changed his name to Ruminator, but it was in a very good location,
Yeah.
and it was near a college, and he still couldn't make it. One of the other things we've tried to do is have good readings in our store and
Yeah.
good events. Besides having Sedaris coming on Thursday,
Okay.
we have to get tickets for that one, and it's caused a lot of difficulty.
But
we have
It's worth
nice.
the trouble.
We have nice. Yeah,
Everybody
we
who
have.
comes, not everybody, but a lot of people come, then they browse and they buy, and right? They get into the
Absolutely.
spirit and they'll come back.
Well, the publicity is more important in this one than others.
Do you have a website?
We have a website,
What is it?
ColiseumBooks.com.
All right. And you can order off of the
No,
website?
you cannot order off
But
the
you can
website.
see what you have.
No, you can't see my inventory, but you can see what the events are.
Right.
You can see specials that we have, and keep up with what we're doing. And we have a series of events in Bryant Park as well, every
Okay.
Wednesday afternoon at
Oh, that's
12:30.
All right,
Good
we've-
readings.
Wait, I
We've
just like
come
to
to-
add one
what?
thing.
What?
That Mango Cafe in Mount Kisco has just been added to the, what's the name of it?
Zagat.
Zagats,
Very good.
with a very high recommendation.
So you two characters have a lovely bookstore. It is a lovely bookstore, and there is a great nostalgic feeling about finding it again on 42nd Street. And I hope our viewers will go, and that we should support bookstores like you, because it is an important thing to have.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much. Thank you.